All right, number 14. Find an equation for the graph below. Um, so some things I noticed about this. Looking from the high point to the high point here, that's a distance of 8. So the period is 8, which means b has to be 2 pi divided by 8 or pi over 4. So whether I'm going to give 4 different answers here. Some people use sine, some people use cosine. I looked at all of them here. Whether it's a sine or cosine, the period is 8. So the b has to be pi over 4. Also, I noticed that the center line here, a horizontal center line, is down 1. That is, it goes up as high as 3 and down as low as -5. So it's been shifted down 1, down 4 from there, up 4 from there. Okay, so the -1, I don't care whether you call it a sine or a cosine, it's shifted down 1. Likewise, the amplitude is 4. From the midline up to the top or from the midline down to the bottom, the distance is 4. So whether you call it a sine or a cosine, the amplitude is 4. The only thing that's going to change now is what's the horizontal shift? If I see this as a positive sine curve, if I see this as starting right here going upwards, then that was a horizontal shift of 3. So if I use a +4 sine here, then it's a horizontal shift of 3. So in parentheses, x minus 3 times that pi over 4. If I see this as an upside down sine curve, so maybe starting right here and going downwards, well then I shifted it back 1. The starting point is back 1. So that's an x plus 1 here. If I think of it as a cosine curve, a positive cosine curve, well maybe I'm starting, maybe I'm thinking the origin got shifted over to there, so my cosine curve starts up high. So that's a shift of -3, so there's an x plus 3. There are a couple of people that actually would have said this too, that it's an x minus 5. I didn't accept it an x minus 5 because that's starting up at that top point. Or if you think of an upside down cosine curve, maybe you're thinking of their axes as being shifted there and starting down below. So that would have been a shift of +1 to the right, so an x minus 1 there. So depending on which one you chose, most of the numbers are the same, only the horizontal shift would be different depending on whether you used a plus sign or a minus sign or a plus cosine or a minus cosine. Anyway, next, 15. Find the exact value of the cosine of the sine inverse of 12 over 13. Well, sine inverse of 12 over 13 is an angle. It is an angle, actually the smallest angle, whose sine is 12 over 13. So this angle right here, the opposite is 12 and the adjacent is 13. No, opposite over hypotenuse, right? That's sine, opposite over hypotenuse, 12 over 13. This angle is the angle whose sine is 12 over 13. I can use Pythagoras and get 13 squared minus 12 squared turns out to be square root of 25, which is 5. So this other side has to be 5. I can now say what all of the trig functions of this angle are. In particular, I want what's the cosine of that angle. Well, the cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, 5 over 13. Similarly, on number 16, I didn't use a number here, I used a letter. The inverse tangent of x means the angle whose tangent is x. The angle whose tangent is x. This angle right here, if I make the opposite side x and the adjacent side 1, then this angle is the angle whose tangent is x divided by 1. I want to know what's the sine of that angle. So I want to know what's the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. Well, I'm going to have to use Pythagoras to figure out that the hypotenuse is the square root of 1 squared plus x squared. So the sine is x over the square root of 1 plus x squared. This one is backwards from that one in that you're doing the sine on the inside and then the arcsine on the outside. Sine of 3 pi over 4, that gets you clear over here into the second quadrant, and the sine would be 1 over square root of 2. Right? But then when I say what's the sine inverse of 1 over square root of 2, sine inverse of 1 over square root of 2 literally means the smallest angle whose sine is 1 over the square root of 2. Well, you're not going to get 3 pi over 4 back again because that's not the smallest angle, because you got this smaller angle here of just pi over 4 whose sine is 1 over the square root of 2. So pi over 4 is the solution there. There you go. If you have any questions on any of these things, if I went through them too fast or you want a different explanation, please ask about it on the discussion board, or send me a message within MomApp, and we'll do what we can.